Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isvaron, and with me today is Brad Billet, Deputy Commissioner for the Office of the Mayor in New York City. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Heather.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about terrorism, and you were there in those terrible moments, days, months, and even years after 9/11. And makes me wonder about people's attitudes towards terrorism. Do you think there's apathy?
Well, I think in the immediate days after 9/11, it was very fresh in everyone's mind. And as each day progresses, people forget about sort of what has happened. We're reminded every day of terrorism, whether it be the president talking about it, whether it be a mayor's talking about it, or whether it be incidents happening in New York or around the country. If there's a transformer explosion now, or if there's some sort of natural disaster, people immediately think terrorism, or a plane crash, they think terrorism. And so that's their first question. I'm asked constantly by people and around of, do you think that there's going to be another terrorist attack? And people before 9/11 never even talked about terrorism. It was something that happened overseas. It's something that happened not in this country. And that's changed. 9/11 changed the paradigm of the public's perception. And threats are there every day, and they'll continue to be there. Our job as people in government and the public is to make sure that it doesn't happen, and if it does, to recover very quickly or to minimize the effects of it.
And so that leads me to the question of, have we learned the lessons? Are we better prepared?
We're definitely better prepared. Have we learned lessons? Absolutely. Do we continue to learn lessons? Every day. As the imagination goes and the terrorists, they see the different things that we're doing every day, the different precautions that we're adopting. As you can see from this last December, many years ago, they stopped having fluids on airplanes. And then somebody brought something in their underwear. And so that each time something like that happens, both the public and the government has to respond to the different types of threats. And they have to respond in a way that is going to allow the public to actually operate and to have commerce operate, and for the public not to be afraid to not do something, because then the terrorists have won.
Right.
But also protect the public and allow the continuity of government to continue. And so that it's a constant cat and mouse game. There has been some great programs that have happened in New York City, specifically in where the police department, right after 9/11 with Commissioner Kelly, stood up a counterterrorism division, which didn't exist before 9/11. You now have different public safety agencies and also different agencies around the nation that may not be public safety agencies per se, but may be looking at threats or looking at what are the risks associated with either their agencies, their installations, and that is a new discussion that's happening. Unfortunately, I think some people in the private sector, where security right after 9/11 was at the board level, they said, this is very important and we can't allow that to happen. It started to shift back down and down the chain of command of the organizational structure of private sector. And I think that that's unfortunate, but as things happen and as, when another event occurs, then it's going to be the forefront again. But the economy has had a great deal of effect on how much money you're going to put towards prevention. And I think that that's one of the things that's challenged today of there's only a finite amount of money to put forward, and where does that money go?
And with that, it leads me to the private sector, and you work with United Nations. You also travel around the country quite a bit. And how do those relationships grow? How do you help them understand that threat is still very real?
Well, I think when I've lectured around the nation on 9/11 and the response to 9/11, anyone in that audience always gained some knowledge because they weren't there and they asked questions. And some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that I think was not so readily understood was the effects of what we're going to have both in the public perception and also to the victims. One of the things before, and whether or not you think back to TV 800 in which I dealt with some of the responses, was terrorism or an accident or whatever the idea you have about that. The simple fact of the matter is we learned great lessons there. And we learned that families come first. Give the families and give the victims the information. Also have a consistent message. And that's one thing that when I go around and I lecture, I try to instill is that, after 9/11, we had a consistent message where we didn't have 80 different agencies saying 80 different messages. There was one consistent message, and I think the public needs to be reassured in that. And so for the public officials that are out there, for the governors or the mayors or the chief executives of the jurisdictions, they need to make sure that everyone in that jurisdiction is going to be saying the exact same message and telling the exact same incident the way it happens. And also be honest. Be proactive and honest, saying that if you don't know what's going on, say, we don't know, it's under investigation, let's take a step back, we have it under control, we're moving forward, and doing that type of proactive communications after an incident is very, very important.
And speaking of citizens, New Yorkers are known for their resiliency. And as you travel,
absolutely,
as you travel around the country, do you sense that America as a whole is getting more resilient when we're talking about the public, or do you think it's pretty much the same as it was?
It depends on where you are, and it depends on, a lot of, there are two schools of thought, really. One school of thought is that the federal government, through DHS or other agencies, is going to take care of, when something big happens, they're going to come in and be the white knight to take care of it. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. I think what's going to really occur is that it's going to be a local or state officials and government that's going to be able to assist in these matters. To that end, I think a lot of the outreach has to happen on the local level. And being from the city of New York, I'm a local, so I can say that the local outreach is the most important because they're the first responders in the community. They're the firefighters, they're the police officers, they're the paramedics that respond to the incidents. And they're the ones that need to know what's going on and engaging the public, both in a preparedness, which is not only for terrorism, but for all natural disasters. Whether or not I have a go kit that's related to terrorism, or I have a go kit for a hurricane, or for a winter storm. It's the same go kit, and I'm being prepared. Talking to your family, coming up with a plan, and I think there's some great resources online through FEMA, through your emergency management agency, the Office of Emergency Management in New York, as the case may be. Looking at that, talking to your neighbors, really trying to help each other, and knowing what resources are also locally available. And in talking about resources, one of the key things and what I think was very good from 9/11 is the terrorists thought that this incident was going to break up and make everyone not talk to each other and really scare everyone in the United States. And what it's done is just the opposite. It's sort of unite everyone against a common enemy. And the common enemy is somebody that wanted to destroy us, which was terrorism. Whether it's Al-Qaeda or some other group, they will bond together as Americans or as residents in the United States and really go and be united against this terrorist act, as it may be. And they're not allowing terror to instill the fear that the terrorists are trying to instill. People are still shopping, people are still going out, and that's what we need. If you change your conduct and what you're doing, you've let the terrorists win.
So what best practices would you suggest for public safety officials to engage their local citizenry in preparedness?
Well, there's a couple of ones. One I just mentioned was sort of engaging the public in preparedness and sort of getting the word out, letting them know what plans exist. And then the other is engaging private sector and the businesses and knowing what the local capabilities are and the local resources and having it sort of where it's a private-public partnership because you need the private sector to assist you to help them. There's lots of resources in very diverse jurisdictions and where some of them may be very urban, some of them may be very rural, and they have different resources and they may need different things. And part of it is getting that engagement with the public and the private sector in order to, in fact, get the best capabilities for your jurisdiction.
So when we're talking about communities, we have public safety officials and we have the citizens. How can we get them together to be better prepared as smaller communities?
It's a great question. Smaller communities or even large urban areas, what there has to be is a full engagement across the board. Not only public safety officials, but other officials. You know, your library, your social services, because and one of the most important things is to engage the youth. I mean, the youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow, and you want to engage them in thinking about preparedness, making it cool to be prepared, and you know, which is a novel concept of, okay, you're prepared, that's a great thing, and also looking at trying to deal with it so that you get all parts of sort of your community, whether it be senior citizens, whether it be the school-age children, or whether it be your teenagers or your youth or your young adults. You want to engage the entire community. And it's not just public safety going out and not just the firemen or police officers or paramedics or EMTs going out there, but it's also engaging them in sort of the discussion of what are the hazards? What are your concerns? What are the concerns of this community? Because each community may have very, very different concerns. In Iowa, they may be concerned about flooding and not so much about terrorism. In Los Angeles, they may be concerned about earthquakes and not so much about flooding. And so that each individual community around the United States has different concerns, and it's looking at sort of the all hazards approach, which will make us stronger, whether it's a natural disaster or whether it's a man-made disaster. And I think that's the way you really look at it. And also sort of teaching your public how to access government. Many people in the public really don't know how to access government, and it's very, very complicated in a lot of jurisdictions. And making it easy, where if there's one phone number like there is in New York City, we have a 311. So no matter what your question is about city government, you can call 311 and get your answer. And you know, so that's one of the ways in which to do it as an example. One of the other ways to do it is going out into your community, having the town hall meetings, going to the schools. You know, everyone in that community should be able to pick up the phone and interact with a police official, interact with a public safety official, interact with your chief executive's office, and how to, in fact, to do that. I mean, that's really where we need to be, because you know, the government, the local jurisdictions and the state jurisdictions are really, you know, for the public, and you know, it's their government. They should be able to access it.
That's great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.